So I got the Pergear 25mm f1.8 lens, and this lens goes for $69, and it is a fully manual lens, so you will need to turn the dials yourself. And it reminds me of the 7 Artisan lenses. The sharpness is actually really good on this lens in the real world. And a fully manual lens like this, it's, a prime lens, so there's no zooming or anything. You basically just need to adjust the aperture and adjust the focus ring. And it really makes photography a little bit more challenging and a lot of fun. So if you're new to photography and you really want to explore using some prime lenses like this are a really good way to go. So in this review, I'm just going to go over this lens in a little more detail, and I'm going to show you what it's capable of. I did some quick lab testing so you can get a baseline of what, kind of sharpness you can expect, minimum focus distance testing with the bokeh balls in the background, and then of course the real world will hit that up. Let's get right into it. So this lens has a 37.5mm effective range when you factor in the crop factor, and a minimum focus distance of 7.8 inches or 20 centimeters, as you will see in the lab testing. It has 5 elements in 3 groups, an aperture range of f1.8 to f16. It also has a 12-blade aperture diaphragm, which helps get nice round bokeh renderings that are very pleasing, as you will see in the sample photos. It has a full metal body. It's very compact and lightweight, and only weighs in at 6.8 ounces or 195 grams. And again, it goes for $69 at the time of this review. It also comes with a nice little lens pouch that you can kind of hook onto your, pant loop or something like that, which is, it's a cool little feature. All right, guys, so here is the lens in hand mounted to my Sony a6400, and you can see just how small this lens is. Now, this is the manual aperture ring, and it does not have any clicking. So it's very smooth when you turn it, which is nice for doing aperture throws and things like that, but it can also turn pretty easily on accident. So you do have to make sure you check this every time. And because there is no electronics on this lens, the camera's not going to tell you what aperture it's at. It's just the aperture f-stop is just going to be blank when you use a lens like this. But that makes it, just a little bit more challenging and fun as well, which I particularly like. Now, the focus ring is pretty darn smooth, and you can see you have your distance gauge there. And at the very minimum focus distance, there is just a little bit of play here, which I don't particularly like. But again, the lens is only $69. And honestly, what I like to do, I pretty much set the focus where I want it, and then I will just move the camera slightly and use the LCD screen and focus peaking to just make sure I have the focus where I want. And that pretty much seems to get me the best results in the easiest, manner. Looking at it from the front here, you can see the lens has a nice coating on it. You can see the color there on the lens coatings, which will help with glare and contrast and things like that. It also has a pinch style lens cap, and it has this cool lens hood here that actually threads on like a lens filter. It's a little bit tricky to get on, but there is the lens hood, and it'll provide a little bit of protection, and it'll also help fight the glare. And that's what it looks like with the lens hood from the top. Alright, so here we are in the lab. I just want to go over some of the lab testing photos quick. And this is basically just an aperture run. And this is a fairly wide angle lens. So there is a little bit of distortion here. You can see there's like a curve on this top line by the color chart up here. If I line it up to the top, you can see how it has that slight bend to it. And this is wide open at f1.8. And you can see the sharpness is pretty darn good. And, you could see as it goes to the corners a little bit, you'd lose a little bit of sharpness, but the depth of field is extremely narrow at f1.8 because I was fairly close to the lab scene when I took this test shot. So you can see the bokeh balls here in the background are rendering nice and round. They look really good. And overall color and clarity is also really good. There is pretty significant vignetting, however, as you will see when I stop the lens down. So here, let me stop it down to f2.8, and you can see here from f1.8 to f2.8 how the corners brighten up. That is the lens vignetting, and that is very common with lenses that are fast aperture. It's just kind of a nature of the beast, but it is sort of significant. I actually like the way that it looks When in the real world, however, with the vignette, it really helps draw the eye into the subject, so it honestly doesn't bother me. All right, so again, here is f1.8, here is f2.8, and if I zoom in here, you can see the sharpness did tack up just a little bit compared to f1.8, and now the sharpness is pretty darn good all the way over to about here in the corner. Beyond that, it starts to blur out a little bit there in the corner. But down here in the lab scene, you can see the string and the pipe cleaners look really good. And that is pretty darn close to the corner. So for the money, this lens performs really well, I would say, in the lab testing as far as sharpness goes. And if I stop it down a little more, now we're up to f5.6. If I zoom in there, you can again see the sharpness, clarity, and detail is excellent. And here we are at f8. It's looking really good at f8 as well. And here's f16. So you can see the bokeh balls at f16 are rendering pretty nice. All right, so let's move on to the minimum focus distance. Now, this lens is a little bit hard to focus manually at the minimum focus distance because the depth of field is so narrow, and the focus ring on the lens just has a little bit of play in it when you're at the minimum focus distance. So I actually found it easier to just slide the camera back just a little bit. I got a little bit too close to the corner. I put the minimum focus distance on the lens, and then I just slid the lens back a little bit until I got the focus absolutely as perfect as I could get it. And if you zoom in here to 100%, you can see the detail on the quarter is quite good, and the out of focus bokeh balls look excellent in my opinion. So this is a really good rendering, and you know, the lens flaws are very well controlled. You can see just a very, very slight amount of purple here on this high contrast, but it's very, very minimal, and you can't see anything on the quarter as far as, you know, fringing and things like that. So let me just stop it down here so you can see how it goes. So this is f1.8, this is f2, and this is f2.8. Now let me just zoom in here a little bit so you can see, even with the 12 blade aperture, you can still see a little bit of octagoning going on here on the bokeh balls, which is a little bit unfortunate. I thought with the 12 blades they would be round throughout the entire aperture range, but they are not. So just so you're aware, there is a little bit of octagoning when you stop down. So this is at f4 here, this is at f5.6, this is at f8, and this is at f16. So pretty much at all the aperture ranges, the lens performs quite well at the minimum focus distance. Okay, so looking at the real world photos, I pretty much had the lens wide open for almost all of these shots. So because it's a fully manual lens, it's not going to tell you what aperture you're at after the fact. So you got to pay attention to what aperture you're using if you want to know in post what you actually were shooting at. So I pretty much had it at f1.8 for almost all of these. So you can see here, I took this picture of the leaf off my deck, and again, just look at how sharp and just buttery the background is, the depth of field. It's like a dreamy shot, and I really enjoy the way this lens renders. Here's another example just on my railing here, my old railing that I obviously need to replace at some point, but you know, budget's tight, people. Here's another shot of just my car emblem on the back of my car, and again, I just really enjoy the way this lens renders. It just provides a nice look, and you can see at wide open you do have a little bit of darkening vignetting in the corners here, but I actually like the way that looks when it comes to shots like this. Another interesting aspect of this lens is the flaring that you get when shooting into the sun. Now, depending on what angle you're at, the lens has pretty extreme lens flaring, which is not ideal in a lot of situations, but if you're looking for that a different look, an interesting look, you want a portrait and you want some interesting lens flare effects, this is a cool lens for getting flare effects like that. I noticed a very similar flaring on these 7 Artisans lenses I reviewed, and I will have those linked up at the end of this review if you want to check those out. And you can see here just how punchy and contrasty the images are in good lighting at the golden hour here. It's a really good optic for shots like this. Look at this image. This is at the minimum focus distance on this weed, flower, whatever this thing is. And that background butter is just awesome. Here's just another image, and I wanted to put the sun here in the corner so you can see that flaring effect and also the bokeh ball renderings that you get when looking up in a tree situation. Here's just a headlight on a truck, Thought it looked kind of cool. I was just walking through a tunnel and I put the lens to out of focus and just took a picture. I thought it created a nice dreamy, sort of tunnel effect. And I was just hiking along a trail here, and here's just a house. I did stop the camera down to about f4 for this image because the scene was extremely bright. So the sharpness is exceptionally good, and the depth of field is a little larger than it would have been if I had it at f1.8. Same thing with this image. I stopped her down a little bit to about f4 because it was extremely bright, and you can see, just look at that clarity and detail and sharpness. It's absolutely amazing, and I was shooting in raw quality. So this is what you can expect from this lens, and like I said, I was very impressed at the end of the day. Oh, this awesome Empanada truck parks out here near where I work. It's fantastic. They have unbelievable empanadas, and just look at the detail on the menu here. As you can see, really phenomenal. By far the best empanadas I've ever had. This was a beef and cheese, and this is what it looked like. And another cool thing about this lens is the minimum focus distance of only 20 centimeters. So you can actually hold something in your hand easily and take a nice sharp shot of it. Here's just an angle looking in on this beef and cheese empanada. I mean, look at that. Absolutely killer. The crust on this empanada was like ridiculous. And here's just a half-eaten shot. Another angle of the truck. And this is just a sculpture near where I live. And I actually did edit this one a little bit, and I added a little bit more of a vignette, so you can see that vignette there on the edges and the corners. Just trying to draw the eye into the subject. Here on this shot, you can see a little bit of that distortion that I was talking about earlier because I was so close to this subject, and this sign was fairly small. It was only about a foot across or so. So I got pretty close to it, and just so I can illustrate the distortion that this lens does have a little bit, not too bad though. Here's just another angle, and here's one more angle. And I just took a quick picture of this beer on my deck, and I was really happy with how it came out. It looks pretty dreamy. See, that background rendering is fairly awesome. That sun flare effect I was telling you about earlier, I just wanted to show you here. Now this is shooting directly into the sun, and you can see the flaring is absolutely extreme, but it does provide some pretty interesting results. So here's one angle, and then I just changed the angle of the lens a little bit so you can see a different rendering, and here's another angle. So you can get all sorts of different lens flaring results depending on what angle you have the lens at in relation to the sun and your subject. And here's one of Layla at my parents' house on Father's Day. And look at that sharpness, wide open f1.8, and you can see the sharpness is absolutely amazing, tack sharp. Here's some chips and dip. And here's one of Jace. Let me just zoom in on this and look at that sharpness. I mean, you could see the detail is really fantastic. And I was so close to him, so he does have that little bit of a wide angle, like, balloony effect. I much prefer telephoto lenses when it comes to portraits, but because when you're really close to your subject like this, it does look a little bit distorted. But when the subject's further back, like this one, you can see there's very little distortion in Layla's face. But when Jace is this close to me, there is a bit of distortion. You can only you only see a little bit of his ears, for example. And then he got a little bit closer to make a funny face, but because he was moving, I was not able to get the focus right. It actually focused on his lip here. So this would have been a really cool shot if I nailed the focus, but he was moving towards me, and it just is what it is. You can have the camera on rapid fire mode and you'll have better luck getting a shot like this in focus. But I just thought it was an interesting shot. Anyways, I'm looking off the deck at my parents' house. This is the view. Here's just a picture of a stack of napkins. And this is just a Father's Day card that we got my dad. He's handy with the tools and stuff. So Layla picked this card out. She thought it was perfect. And I was like, you know what? You are right. Here's just another image of a delicious beer in a glass here. Just look at that background depth of field fall off. It's really excellent. And just a close-up, you can see the sharpness is really good. Here's one of my dad on Father's Day. And let me just zoom in here so you can see the detail. And it's just excellent. The colors, clarity, contrast, detail, really good results in my opinion. We had a teriyaki flank steak my brother picked up from Uncle Giuseppe's. Phenomenal. It was a delicious steak. And now this image I stopped down to f4 because it was just too bright and the shutter speed was maxed out on my A6400, at 1/4000th of a second, so I had to stop her down. But look at the detail on this flower. I mean, it is just fantastic. This is just a reflection. I was looking at a table that was glass. I thought it was kind of interesting shot though. And here's the birthday girl, Jasmine. She just turned 1 year old and she's doing really great. Look at this image. What a happy dog. And again, just look at the sharpness, clarity, contrast. It also has like a little bit of a dreamy look to it, which is one of the things I really liked about the 7 Artisan lenses. They have like a character to it. You know, they always say lenses have a look. Well, this lens has a look as well. And you can see here, this is a pretty good example of that little bit of a dreamy look that you get. Almost like the colors are slightly muted or something like that, you know, in certain scenarios, depending on what the contrast in the scene is like. And I just find that fun and interesting. And here's another one. Just zoom in here. See that sharpness and clarity again. Here's another one. And this is my buddy Mark. We just stopped for lunch during work, so I just took a quick snapshot. Here's another one. You can see on the bottom right, I actually had my finger in front of the lens a little bit because I was playing with the focus. But you can see the sharpness on this one. I nailed it a little bit better on the eyes and the eyebrows and stuff and the beard. Much sharper than the previous shot, but that was just user error on my part. Like I said, it is a little bit difficult to get the manual focus on perfect on a moving subject. So you're best off just like slightly moving the camera, maybe even taking it in rapid fire mode to ensure you get a sharp shot. And here's just a picture of the water with the lemon in there. And again, the background sharpness, depth of field and everything is really cool. All right, guys, so at the end of the day, the Pergear 25mm f1.8 lens goes for $69 US, and for that amount of money, it's an absolute steal in my opinion, especially if you're looking for a wide angle, fast aperture, prime lens, and you're willing to manually focus. So it performed really well, I would say overall in the lab, and in the real world, it produced excellent image results, and it just has that a cool look as well. The lens flaring is kind of interesting. You might not like it, but it's a cool effect to just have in your arsenal of tools if you're looking to get a different shot than a standard, you know, snapshot or whatever. So I really hope you got something out of this review, and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to be informed of future videos as they come out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave comments or ask questions below. And also product links and things like that will also be below in the description area. So I appreciate the support, and I really hope you guys have a great day. I will catch up with you next time. Take care.